volcanoes, multiverses, marionettes. Those were a few of our favorite things at the movies in 2022, which we're celebrating on this Best Of episode of the Think Christian podcast. Welcome back to our third and final episode in this series, looking back at the year that was. I'm Josh Larsen, your host and editor over at thinkchristian.net, where we believe there's no such thing as secular. Our previous episodes tackled TV and music, and you can find those in the Think Christian podcast feed. But it's the big screen we're focusing on today with the help of Abby Olcese, J.R. Forasteros, and listeners who chimed in on social media. You can always find us at Think Christian or send us their picks via email, tcpodcast@thinkchristian.net. Let's start with a note from Jonathan Cana, whose favorite film of last year was After Yang, writer-director Kogonada's future-set family drama about an AI robot who malfunctions. Here's Jonathan. I can't think of any film in recent memory, perhaps Terrence Malick's A Hidden Life or Alex Garland's Annihilation come close, where the combination of story, characterization, cinematography, and production design combined to create such a sensual feast for the imagination. Not to mention a poignant exposition of an ephemeral idea like memory. In its own very quiet, very meditative way, After Yang explores just what role memory plays in the establishment and evolution of human identity. And its breathtaking final act offers a glimpse at what it might mean for the very essence of a person to live on in the lives and memories of others, even as the body begins to decay. Thank you, Jonathan. Jonathan used to write for us before life got too busy, but he always takes time to share his year-end reflections on the movies, and I'm grateful for that. Many more movie thoughts are ahead, but a quick note first. We have been asking you on these recent shows to go ahead and review us and rate us over on Spotify. So please do that if you have a chance. It just takes a second or two. It is something you can only do if you're listening on the mobile app, so keep that in mind. Okay, in another life, somewhere out there in the multiverse, I got to talk to Abby Olcese and J.R. Forasteros about our favorite movies of 2022. And we recorded it, luckily for you. Here we are with J.R. Forasteros and Abby Olcese, ready to discuss the best films of last year. Now, cinema has moved on. I think Sundance 2023 is probably going to be underway by the time this episode is out, but we're going to spend some more time on highlights from last year. Before we do get to some specific titles, I am curious to hear from both of you. Maybe we'll start with you, Abby. What sort of movie year was it for you? Were there any themes, any trends, anything that stood out or seemed to define the previous 12 months at the movies?
Yeah, I was actually really pleasantly surprised with the caliber of movies that came out this year, particularly with regard to movies that I think hold up to multiple viewings. I can think of 3 within my top 10 at least that I think really merit multiple views and reveal new exciting things each time. So we're going to talk about Everything Everywhere All at Once. That's one of them. Jordan Peele's Nope is another one. I've had the great pleasure of sharing that with my parents and having them want to share that with everybody they know. So
nice.
It's the gift that keeps on giving. And I'm trying to think if there were others. Oh, White Noise is another one that I think merits multiple views as well, because there are so many details in all of those movies and so many sub-themes that you can just keep coming to again and again and again, and you'll find something new every time.
That rings true to me. I'm thinking about my own top 10, and at the top, After Sun and After Yang were both movies I rewatched to just fully immerse myself in and know how much I love them. I knew I loved them right from the start. But yeah, Everything Everywhere All at Once. Nope, I didn't get to a second time, really wanted to, might have bumped it even higher on my list if I had. But yeah, dense, rewatchable titles does seem to be a hallmark from last year. Does that ring true for you as well, JR?
Absolutely. And, for me, being a horror buff, it was a really, really strong year for horror, both indie and studio horror. And I would say similarly to what Abby said, even a lot of those horror films, which often I think it's easy for a horror film to be a one watch, kind of one and done. And then the only reason you revisit it is for nostalgia or something. But a lot of the films that came out this year, from Barbarian to Nope to X and Pearl from Ty West, the kind of twin surprise there. Watching each of those movies made me want to go back and watch the other one again to see more of how they're connected, So yeah, I think a lot of that rewatchability. That seemed like there was also a lot of dealing with, I think, how fraught and fractured relationships have gotten. Of course, Everything Everywhere All at Once is that. Also, Banshees of Inisherin felt that way very much. Even a lot of the rom-coms that came out, I think, were more tense in dealing with that kind of a thing. I don't know if either of you caught 7 Days. It's a rom-com about 2 Indian kids that are thrust together into they're set to go on a date for an arranged marriage by their parents, and then the COVID lockdown hits and they're trapped inside together. And so like a kind of a creative way to get there. But another really just interesting, another interesting film about cultures colliding and expectations and all that kind of stuff, which just seems more and more and more interesting, as we progress through the kind of culture that we're in right now.
And that was 7 days, you said?
7 days. Yeah, it was on Hulu is where I caught it. So didn't get a lot of buzz, but when I posted about it, several people also were like, oh yeah, I saw that randomly also, and it was great. So
interesting.
And I wanted to just add on to JR's observation about indie horror. It was a really great year for horror, both large scale and independent. And another movie that I think is a really dense and symbolically interesting film that I think rewards multiple watchings is A Wounded Fawn, which is available on Shudder and kind of gets into maybe another sub-theme of 2022, which is endurance performances. I feel like both that and Pearl have 2 really incredible, specifically end credits performances from the leads that you really cannot believe that they are still doing for as long as they go on. And it's really impressive to watch, like not in a self-parodic way, not in like a obnoxious way, but just like a really impressive way that I think is worth paying attention to.
Okay, so a couple titles there that slipped by me, and that's the stage I'm at, actually. We're recording this, about mid-January, and it's the stage of how did I not see that? You mentioned White Noise. It was one I just watched a couple days ago, and Pearl is on my agenda for tomorrow. It's, having seen X, I knew I had to get to it at some point as it being this prequel of sorts, but just didn't before the end of the year, and am going to rectify that shortly. So we've already touched on a number of good titles. Go ahead, JR. You want to jump in on that?
Well, I don't know that this isn't a new theme, but it's still dealing with a lot of like class warfare. Even, I'm thinking back to the Batman, which, we got a reboot of a major superhero franchise, and that really honed in with the Riddler being an incel and playing on a lot of that. Also, of course, the 2 movies that came out almost right next to each other, Triangle of Sadness and The Menu, which like really went all in on that sort of thing. Glass Onion also had a lot of that kind of critique going on, which again, Knives Out did as well. So that's not terribly surprising, but it again seems that we're still culturally trying to grapple with these like massive inequalities that we see all around us and wondering, what does justice look like in any kind of meaningful sense? And is there any hope, or do we just burn it all down and start over?
Definitely the Eat the Rich subgenre was strong last year for sure. So we've touched on a number of titles already. Let's dig into a handful a bit more deeply. And I want to start with Abby's pick, which happened to be my favorite documentary from last year. It very nearly cracked my own top 10. Abby, tell us what film this is and tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah. So the movie that we're discussing at this point is Fire of Love, which is a documentary by Sarah Dosa. It was, I guess, released by National Geographic, and you can find it on Disney Plus to stream. But it's the story of Maurice and Katja Kraft, who were a married couple who were also volcanologists and kind of pioneering in the field, were part of it just as it started to kind of get its legs. And were kind of singularly dedicated their entire lives to the study of volcanoes and eventually ways to keep volcanoes basically from killing large amounts of people by informing them about the importance of recognizing warning signs from coming volcanic eruptions, basically, and encouraging them to evacuate. The Crafts died in, I think, 1991. As they were looking at a volcano. So that's kind of the framework of the story, is that it starts on their very last day, then kind of flashes back to the process, the story of their career, and then comes back around to this kind of really sweet and dramatic conclusion. It's, I think, as much a love story as it is a really interesting look at the science of volcanoes.
A set of forces collide inside the planet throughout the enormity of geologic time to trigger one instant, an eruption that forever reshapes the Earth. And across humanity's 2 million years, 2 tiny humans are born in the same place, at the same time, and they love the same thing. And that love moved us closer to the Earth.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to describe it, and it's right there in the title, right? Fire of Love. Mm-hmm. Did you go for this one too, JR?
I did. I saw a trailer for it before something we saw this year. And it was one of those that I knew if it was possible, I needed to see it on the big screen. Because most of the footage, I don't know if either of you knows the percentage, but most of the footage was actually the Kraft's own footage that they had shot, while they were studying.
Yeah, I think it's got to be like 90% because there's maybe some like stock footage or things that Sarah Dosa adds in as kind of illustration, but the vast majority of it is stuff they shot.
Yeah.
When I went to see it, they had a Q&A with the director after the film. And one of the questions was, how did you decide this was the next thing you wanted to do? And she said it was because she was looking for stock footage of volcanic eruptions and was digging through the archives and was like, wow. All of this is from the same people. What? And so that question led her to the exploration. So, I mean, what I would say, in way of supplementing what Abby said about this film, is that so much of it felt like I was watching a sci-fi film on another planet. Mm-hmm. So many of the images were so alien. And I was shocked to learn that before the Crafts, we still basically knew functionally nothing about how volcanoes worked or what they even were. Like, they were still practically a cosmic mystery right here on Earth, But then I think when you start seeing the footage that they're able to capture, you're like, well, yeah, I get it. This is so alien and so dangerous, obviously. And so what it engendered in me, and one of the reasons I wanted to see it on a big screen, was this profound sense of awe.
Yeah.
It's a sense of play that I think emerges when I think about any of the stuff that exists in our world that didn't have to be here, that are things that we get to experience as creatures who live on this planet in a way of communing with God that I think is very spiritual. And yet also, to Abby's point, I mean, these people died doing this stuff, right? So it's not safe always to experience these things. It took me to a really complex theological place as I was just enjoying the literally unbelievable. The only reason I believed it is because it's a documentary, but I would have thought it was CGI if it was in any other movie. The footage of stuff that is happening on our planet, that it just seems so completely alien and other. I found it really beautiful.
And watching it again last night, I think for the second time, I watched it for the first time at the True Falls Festival and hadn't seen it again since, but just remembered how much I'd loved it. Just the fact that this is about 2 people who both loved this one thing intensely that they wanted to understand more and to get closer to it all the time and to try and recognize its beauty and mystery and also the fear that it instills really resonated with me as a person who likes to review films from a Christian perspective and whose faith is a big part of their life. There's a lot of crossover, I think, of feeling drawn toward better understanding God or better understanding an art form through a lens of something that means a lot to you, and having both a sense of awe and also a sense of trepidation about the fear and joy and ups and downs that come along with that. I think that's a really powerful element of the film too.
Yeah, for sure. That's the hope when we're engaging with a lot of stuff that we talk about here in this show. Absolutely. JR, I like that you brought in the fact that there is a sense of play, because that struck me right away. There's some really crunchy striking guitar chords that the movie opens with. You're like, wait, is this a nature documentary? What's going on here? I think I could also ascribe a sense of play to the narration from filmmaker Miranda July, which is very dry, a little droll, but fits also the playfulness. And then at the same time, the heart of the movie is what we've already talked about. Another phrase you used, JR, cosmic mystery. While watching this for me, Job 38 came to mind. And especially in the way that the crafts, they document and are in awe of these geological forces that are eons in the making, you know? So that gave me this Job 38 vibe where God answers Job's complaints with this massive monologue that includes this challenge. Where were you when I laid the earth's foundation? And I think Fire of Love, at least for me, very much put me in my cosmic place in that way, but also because it does focus on the humanity of the crafts and their relationship. This brings us back to the love angle. It's also a very personal story, which of course Job was a personal story too. So I saw a lot of parallels there with Fire of Love.
There's a song by a band called Me Without You, which I'm sure a lot of our listeners are familiar with them, but it's called The King Beetle on the Coconut Estate. And it's a narrative story in the song about these beetles on this coconut plantation where every night the dead leaves are gathered and burned. And the beetles, of course, don't understand this process. All they know is every night this great light appears and they want to know what it is. But every time any of the professor beetle can't study it well enough to explain it, and the soldier beetle, despite all of his power, can't get close enough without being burned. And it's about this like inability to ascertain what this divine light is. And towards the end of the song, there's this plea where it moves out of story into more of an engagement with the listener, where he says, why not be utterly consumed in the fire? And why not be utterly changed into fire? Talking about God as this, cosmic mystery at the heart of creation. And I kept like humming that as I was leaving the theater because of what you said, Abby, right? Like they have this deep love and this deep passion that has not only drawn them towards this cosmic mystery, but also towards one another, right? And bound, you get the sense that their love for one another is inseparable from their love for volcanoes, and to even try to tease those out is a little silly. They certainly never tried to do such a thing. And I thought about what it means to love something so much that you are happy to be consumed by it, and how that is in terms of spiritual formation, that's the goal, right? Is to love God so much that we are transformed in the image of Christ. I don't know. I was really moved by it.
Yeah. And also the idea that you can't do that fully without the help of other people. I think there's a bit of narration in the film where Miranda July says, apart, like by themselves, they could only dream of volcanoes. Together, they can reach them. And I feel like that is also true of the body of Christ, right? Like we can only have select parts of the experience of the spiritual growth that we want to have. And by being in communion with other people, we can better understand the world, and we can better understand the love of God and our relationship with God.
So that's Fire of Love, which actually it is National Geographic produced, but it's available because of, that's part of the Disney conglomerate now. So you can watch it on Disney Plus. If listeners have not seen it, it's not the big screen, but still it looks incredible. So catch up with it there. We're going to move to our next pick with an email that we got from listener Carl Udy. Again, you can always email us with comments or questions at tcpodcast@thinkchristian.net. Carl highlighted Everything Everywhere All at Once and wrote this. Perhaps one of the most fun and creative renderings of a multiverse in recent memory, but perhaps more importantly, it reminds us of the need to redeem the narrative we are in by loving those around us, instead of living in bitter regret for the narratives we wished we were in. So, JR, this was your choice for one of the best movies of the year. Does Carl's comment resonate with you?
Absolutely. And by the way, hi, Carl. Good. He's a buddy that I met through the podcast, actually. So
awesome.
Hi.
Nice.
Hi, Carl. Great to hear from you. He always has such terrific insights. So I love it. This movie had so much buzz. It was one of the movies that I didn't want to even watch a trailer for. So every time the trailer came on, I just, did that in the theater. And as soon as it was over, I turned to my wife and I was like, if that's not the best movie that I see this year, then what a year for movies, because it is going to be like nigh impossible to top that. And I mean, what can we possibly say that hasn't been said about this movie yet? From the incredible performances to the amazing way the script holds together despite being completely bonkers, everything about it. I think thematically, the idea that nothing matters, so we can do whatever we want, actually counterintuitively, maybe I think has some rich theological fodder for us. And I just genuinely enjoyed. I think also, the idea of the multiverse is something that's becoming more and more accepted within scientific circles, like with quantum mechanics and all of that. And so I just enjoyed the opportunity to do a little theological dancing with the idea of the multiverse, because I think sooner rather than later we're going to have to go there anyway, and we're going to have to ask like what that looks like. And I thought Everything Everywhere All at Once provided us with a great opportunity to, as Carl said, like redeem the life we have, not waste time grieving the life we want to have.
Yeah, I think that's well said. And you've got my mind spinning more scientifically than it was during the movie. But I think you're right. This is maybe a tiptoe away in to think about what matters if that does become a reality. How does it shift our understanding of things, including our understanding of God and our own existence? How does it not shift it? What stays the same? What's elemental, even with that reality? When Evelyn, the main character played by Michelle Yeoh, is thrust into this multiverse, what changes for her and what remains fundamental? I mean, those are the crucial questions that I think the movie does explore.
No matter what, I still want to be here with you. I will always want to be here with you.
What did you make of this one, Abby?
Yeah, JR, when you said that the concept that nothing matters has some kind of deep theological connections, I'll quote my mom again in discussing the film after she watched it. She brought up Julian of Norwich and the quote, "All shall be well, and all manner of things shall be well." And I think that's kind of the direction that the film's idea, the switch from the nihilism of nothing matters to the nothing matters that we get at the end from Michelle Yeoh is very much that all of the stresses, all of the things that surround her reality don't matter as much as the thing that's in front of her right now, the relationships that actually make up her life, her relationship to her daughter, her relationship with her father and her husband. And I think that's kind of where it ends up coming to. And I think that's a really beautiful transition. It's the same language, but with a radically different meaning behind it, and I really like that. Another thing that came up for me when I was writing about the film for Sojourners is a quote from Joan Chittister and her book Wisdom Distilled from the Daily. And she said, "The spiritual life, in other words, is not achieved by denying one part of life for the sake of another. The spiritual life is achieved only by listening to all of life and learning to respond to each of its dimensions wholly and with integrity." Which I feel like has like big multiverse implications, right? Like looking at all of these different elements and considering like what is ancillary, what is specific to those experiences, what is elemental, what is universal between all of these experiences that really help me to kind of stay anchored and figure out what is true about myself and in my own identity. Which in turn, I think helps you kind of understand how to, I guess, in kind of therapist terms, bloom where you're planted, to kind of understand what's really true about your life and to appreciate it for what it is and not to reject what you have for what you wish you had, which is a huge element of the movie. But also just on an aesthetic level, I really appreciate the kind of childlike sense of creativity that Everything Everywhere All at Once has, mixed with all of this really profound emotional maturity and, theological and philosophical depth that we're discussing it with. But essentially, it's just in terms of attitude, a lot of the stuff that the Daniels make, which is an attitude that I really appreciate, is just like a couple of like third or fourth grade boys who just had an idea and thought, wouldn't it be fun if we did this? And then this happened, and then this happened, and then this happened. And then maybe there's dinosaurs. I don't know. Sounds cool. So it's like this really beautiful balance of, really deeply thought and felt emotion and consideration for the truth of our lives and what we want it to be and what it actually is and how to kind of balance between those two things. And just like insane gonzo creativity.
Yeah.
Like what if dinosaurs? Why not? Why not a bagel with literally everything on it? That sounds like fun. What can we make that look like? I think that's I would love to see more movies address really big and interesting ideas with that amount of creativity. I would love to see more of that.
In terms of the filmmaking, that goes back to what we were talking about with Fire of Love, the playfulness, right? This film is wrestling with these deeply existential, very distressing ideas, but with such a light creativity and playfulness that it doesn't feel overwhelming in that way, even though there's a lot coming at you. The Daniels, the the name the directors go by, Dan Kwan and Daniel Scheinert. Incredible work here, bringing this all together in a massive, quite crazy movie. It was my number 3 of the year. I loved it almost as much as you guys did. And also, this is one that was very hearteningly a huge hit with audiences, despite it being unlike anything else we've probably ever seen and very ambitious. So if there are other listeners who've seen this, maybe the most well-seen of the movies we're going to be talking about, and they want to dig more deeply into some of these theological ideas, Zachary Lee also wrote about it for Think Christian. So that post is at thinkchristian.net. And I'll bring us full circle here by just reading a little bit from Zachary's post, because it touches on the same thing Carl did in his email. This is Zachary. The movie also suggests that the best life isn't necessarily the version in which we have it all, but the one where we live as those who have been loved despite our difficulties and mistakes. What better life is there to live than one marked by the kind of love Jesus showed to us? One that pursues us, even if it doesn't make sense, one that chases us fiercely, and one that doesn't see us for the worst things we've done. A love that jumps universes. So that's Everything Everywhere All at Once. Absolutely one of the best of 2022. All right, time for my pick, the title I wanted to bring to our discussion. It was my number 8 film of the year, the delightful but also very dark stop-motion work, Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio. Del Toro, of course, the mastermind behind films such as The Shape of Water and Pan's Labyrinth and many others. Now, I've had my say about this movie. I actually did some writing for TC, rare these days, but I got on the keyboard and actually wrote something, a deep dive post for the website. I compared Del Toro's version to Disney's live action remake, which also came out in 2022, and then compared both of those to Disney's 1940 original. Basically just went looking for signs of grace in what I consider to otherwise be a fairly works-based fairy tale. So we'll link to that. I'm not going to belabor my point here because I'd rather hear from you two. I want to know what you thought of this film. And I especially want to know, this thing was loaded with religious imagery and references and ideas, though I don't think you could describe it as distinctly Christian, really. But that was just my impression. What did you guys make of it? Let's start with you, Abby.
First of all, I want to note that I've never seen an image of the blue fairy that crossed paths with the biblically accurate angel meme, but we did get it. I thought that was cool.
No kidding.
I think there's a lot going on in this movie. I was primarily moved by it's the way that it addresses grief and the way that it kind of encourages us to have the relationship that it encourages us to have with people who have passed on. And especially the end of the film, which is just about as bittersweet as it gets. It kind of breaks your heart and puts it all back together in that, like, there are people we love and then they die and that's it. And in terms of our earthly knowledge of those people, that's true. Our faith tells us that we will see them again. But in terms of what we have to live with in the time being, we have to live with our memories of those people, and we have to appreciate them for what they've been, and to kind of appreciate our own lives for the finitude that we have, and to live that with as much playfulness and joy and courage, basically, as we possibly can, which I feel like is another kind of sub-theme of that movie. I think there's a lot of, in terms of the religious imagery, I think there's a lot of critique of the institution of religion and the way that sometimes crosses over with portrayals of nationalism. I think the fascist Italy in this film, much like the fascism of the Spanish Civil War in Del Toro's earlier films, it's not a coincidence. I think it's meant to speak to the world that we live in now. And I certainly empathize with Del Toro's feelings about that. I've heard similar ideas voiced by other people in my life, which is not to say that I fully agree with them, but I absolutely get where they're coming from.
Yeah, you can trace a lot of threads from this one to other works by Del Toro, and I think that concern for fascism is absolutely one. It struck me, and maybe this is one thing you liked about it, JR, as very much a horror take on Pinocchio. I mean, the 1940 film is dark too, right? That's not an easy one. But here we really get, especially that sequence of Geppetto carving Pinocchio in a drunken, grief-stricken, to your point, Abby, rage. That's a terrifying sequence. Was the horror one of the things you liked about this one, JR?
It was, but I was surprised. And I was actually going to invite some of the kids that live in my household to watch it with me. And very quickly into the movie, I was like, ooh, glad I didn't.
Yeah.
Yeah. I honestly, I just watched it for the first time yesterday. I kept putting it off because I was like, I don't know, I know the story of Pinocchio. Like what, how interesting can it possibly be? You know? And I was pleasantly surprised. It was whimsical, it was funny, it was very dark in a way that I think Mexican filmmakers tend to be able to pull off a lot better than US filmmakers. I think we have too much of that, like, always look on the sunny side of life mentality, where if we can do dark or we can do whimsical, but it's hard for us. Tim Burton's maybe the only one that really does a good job of fusing those things. And I think Del Toro, I mean, in a lot of his movies has done that really well. Like Pan's Labyrinth, right? Which you already alluded to, Abby. Like you stick a child who's full of wonder and excitement in the middle of very dark circumstance, and you just let those two things happen, So this one, I don't know. Like I looked at, I mean, it's hard when you have a character that sacrifices themselves for the good of everyone else and then is rewarded for that, to not see the Jesus allegory there. But yeah, with Geppetto working on the big crucifix in the church, Abby, to your point, the biblically accurate angel being the fairy, both the I guess we're supposed to understand the angel of life and the angel of death, or whatever, the two twin sisters, talking about how everything has consequences and there's nothing can happen without some other kind of rule. But then the one exception you really have to that is Sebastian J. Crickett's wish, where not only is he allowed to bring Pinocchio back, but actually when he's trying to argue that he should get his wish, he even confesses, well, I guess I didn't actually do a very good job, but please still give me the wish so I can bring it back. Right? I did see a lot of grace in that space right there, where it was almost like whatever we're calling her, the angel of life or the blue fairy or whatever. Like she was almost like, yeah, I'm going to bring him back. Just like, go ahead and make the wish, man.
It doesn't depend on what you do.
It doesn't. And you even, I don't know, maybe I'm reading into the movie what I wanted, but I felt that, right? Like she doesn't even ask him for an accounting. She doesn't bring out a spreadsheet or anything. I mean, you almost got the sense that she's like hiding a smile as he is, well, come on, I did it. Well, I kind of did it. Okay, maybe I didn't even do a very good job. Like he like backtracks so fast, and then she immediately still comes back with, yeah, like here he comes, And I love that he wasn't a flesh and blood boy at the end. A real boy didn't depend on, the human body, right? It was more about what it means to be human, is to be in a relationship, to be loving, to be willing to lay down your life for your friend, Yeah,
so, and then the declaration at that point from Geppetto about, love, I love you just the way you are, is, such a crusher. And also, part of the tension of this movie that I think is pulled between what we can do, what we're responsible for, and what is a gift. I don't know if the movie ever kind of rationalizes that, but I certainly had fun poking around and exploring where it explored these ideas and where it even contradicted itself at times.
Pinocchio, my child, I was trying to make you someone you were not. So don't be Carlo or anyone else. Be exactly who you are. I love you exactly as you are.
And yeah, there's something, I'd like to rewatch it, and I'm probably gonna, because I didn't watch it with my wife and she wants to see it, so rewatch it again. But something about how adding in that layer of the fascist government, so then you have all of these different people that want to be in charge of Pinocchio, right? Who want to put their strings on him, to really lean into the metaphor. Right, not just the circus performer, not just Geppetto, but now even like the fascist government, the government that wants to control and puppeteer the whole country. So yeah, I don't know. There's something there. Listeners, please feel free to at me if you'd like to enlighten me, because I'm still thinking about it, and I would love to hear what folks think about that. But
And we barely touched on the artistry and imagery, with
It's
the
incredible.
stop motion
Yeah.
creativity, right? Did you have a favorite like image or moment or detail with that, Abby, that comes to mind?
I think the scenes that I liked the most were the ones that related to the underworld, where Pinocchio goes the few times that he dies and comes back. Particularly after, I think there's like the scene where he stands up to Mussolini and then like dies immediately and just pops out of the casket and goes, "I died!" And it's like it's a great little kind of whip turn that is just like it's really emblematic of this movie's sense of dark humor. And like the weird skeletal rabbits I thought were a great touch. I want to watch this again to make sure that I have this right, but I'm pretty sure that the first time he goes through, there are these two big wooden doors. I'm fairly certain that's a stylized Jack and Sally on either side of that door. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So there's like
From Nightmare Before
so
Christmas.
there's like little
that
subtle
could
references
be.
and stuff throughout that I think are really cool, like a little tip of the hat. And also the moment when Pinocchio first comes to life, which is I think a good kind of horror moment where he's trying to do his best. He's really enthusiastic, but it really I think portrays well, which is it's a big deal for puppetry because you only have so many expressions. It's kind of hard to really get that emotion on screen with stop motion sometimes. But Geppetto is, I think, genuinely horrified at this thing that he's created, and you can kind of get a really strong sense of the way that he feels, which is, I think, a testament to the craft there.
And the way Pinocchio moves there, like he doesn't understand his body yet. He doesn't understand his legs yet. So he's very floppy, and it gives him almost this like spider-like appearance.
Definitely.
And then,
little monstrous.
Yeah, and then like suddenly sets himself on fire, which is just like this is chaos. This is chaos walking.
Yes. Exactly. All right. Well, thank you both. This has been a lot of fun. I appreciate you joining me. And real quickly, how about we do this before we sign off? I'd love to get one non-movie recommendation you can make from last year. So a favorite album maybe, or a favorite TV series from 2022 that listeners should check out if they haven't done so. Abby, let's stick with you. Do you have one that comes to mind?
I mean, I'll put in a quick plug for the Netflix series 1899, which rules and unfortunately did not get renewed. So prepare yourselves for some heartbreak there, but it's really good. Something else that I really appreciated this year, maybe on a slightly deeper, more theological level, and I'm excited will be coming back in who knows what form, but potentially something really upsetting, is Nathan Fielder's The Rehearsal, which, I think there's some really fascinating stuff in that show about our desire for control, our desire for forgiveness, and our inability to forgive ourselves for the things that we've done. And it really seems like the stuff that's set up in that first season is going to go to some potentially very interesting and emotionally wrenching places in following installments. I can't wait to see what happens next.
That's probably one of those series that I read the most about and listened to a lot of conversations about on podcasts, yet didn't get around to watching. I didn't know when I was going to have the fortitude to peel back all of those meta layers that it seems to be working with. So maybe I'll have to catch up with that before the next season.
I watched the first episode with my wife, Amanda, and she folded in half. She cringed so hard through the whole episode. She was she was like, I can't do anymore. It's too awkward for me. And I was like, I'm mainlining this, baby. It's so good.
Yeah. And it goes in so many, like the direction that is set up by like the first couple of episodes, just, it takes a hard turn and does not come back in ways that are worth sticking around for.
All right. How about you, JR?
So, I mean, I hesitate to do this, but I love the new Quantum Leap. I love it with the passion of someone who loved the original series. I can't tell if it's good or not. All right. I just love it. So, someone who doesn't have the same emotional attachment to the material that I do, watch it and tell me if it's good. I don't care if it's not. I love it and it's around. But I'm very late to this party, but did you all know that Brandi Carlile is awesome?
Mm-hmm.
She has been mentioned. Yes. She's been mentioned on our best music of the year. The list we have of all suggestions we've gotten, she shows up there.
Well, count me in. Her new album, In These Silent Days, I caught her on Saturday Night Live when Steve Martin and Martin Short hosted, and her two performances there absolutely blew me away. And again, she's one of those people, like, I know she's good. I know everyone I know that knows her likes her, so why have I not ever given her a serious listen? I don't know. but I just really like her new album a lot. I cannot quit playing it. It's deeply, deeply spiritual. It's got some incredible, very authentically Christian themes in it, in the way that I think a lot of good American folk music does. But I think it's an incredible album. So it's one of the things I've been enjoying the most towards the end of last year and into this new year.
Nice. All right. Some good bonus suggestions there. Thank you both for those. As we say goodbye, what's the best place for listeners to follow you each this year? Where can you be found, JR?
Well, you can always find me at TC. I'm there writing something, but I'm at JR Forasteros. I'm still on Twitter. I'll go down with the ship, I suppose. And, Facebook.com/JR Forasteros. Those are probably the two best places to find me.
How about you, Abby?
Like JR, I'm still on Twitter. I'm at Abby Olcese, ABBYOLCESE. I always have to spell it because it's never, it's never intuitive. Yeah, it does. And I also recently started a Substack where I am kind of detailing the process of writing my book month by month. And and that is No More Popcorn is the name of that Substack. It's free, so you can just sign up and I send out monthly updates.
Love it. Well, thanks again. Good to talk to you guys. I look forward to doing a lot more of it with both of you this year, all right?
Thanks, Josh.
Thanks, Josh.
Thank you to all the listeners who took time to share their favorite movies from last year with us. A few more here before we sign off. Roger Green emailed at tcpodcast@thinkchristian.net to share what he appreciated about Black Panther Wakanda Forever, the way it portrayed, quote, dealing with loss, with the community helping each other overcome. More Wakanda Forever love came from Bitia Buenrostro, who most appreciated the underwater kingdom of Telocan. Bitia wrote, the inclusion of Mesoamerican culture and brown Mexican actors in Wakanda Forever left a deep impact in my heart and soul. Having grown up in Mexico, where the media generally favors European-looking talent and underrepresents indigenous Mexicans, seeing Tena Huerta and Mabel Cadena on screen was powerful. Hearing the name of Kukulkan, a Mayan deity, being spoken, seeing Mayan hieroglyphs, learning that the production team worked with Mexican musicians and academic scholars to ensure the cultural accuracy of Mesoamerican culture landed on me as a message of care and respect. Those beautiful brown faces on screen have opened doors for those to come and hopefully open the minds of many others. Thank you for that, Bitia. One last email to share. This one comes from Aaron Potter about the Nordic saga, The Northman. This was a dark and strange movie, but one I really enjoyed. It is certainly not for everyone and requires maturity and discernment to view. But despite that, I also found it very spiritually resonant. The TC post about it spoke eloquently about the blood and body-centric nature of this film and linked it to the idea of incarnation, which I found fascinating. But what struck me is at the same time how spiritually focused it was. For the characters in this story, the spiritual world is extremely close and alive in a way that it just isn't for most of us in a modern Western context. Prophecies and visions abound, as do strange but sincere religious rituals, and even the dead are not as dead as we generally expect them to be. To be sure, this is a deeply pagan spiritual world that is grim and dark as can be, and a far cry from the loving holiness and beauty of Christianity. But as is often said of good supernatural horror films, there is something powerful about how seriously they take the non-material world in this movie. Aaron was also kind enough to add, thanks for all that you do at Think Christian. My wife and I deeply appreciate your thoughtful cultural criticism from a discerning, deeply Christian perspective. Well, thank you very much, Aaron. Thank you very much to all the listeners as well and the members of the podcast team. Last year was deeply rewarding for me, and I sent the team an email just saying how every episode I come away learning something, feeling spiritually enriched by something that one of them says. So I can't wait to experience more of that in 2023. The Think Christian podcast is a listener-supported production of Reframe Ministries, a family of programs designed to help you see your whole life reframed by God's gospel story. Visit reframeministries.org for more information. Our audio engineer and post-production supervisor is John Reeder, and Reframe's co-director overseeing content strategy is Robin Baslin. I'm Josh Larsen. Thanks so much for listening. It's regular programming up ahead as we dive officially into 2023. So look for that in a couple of weeks when we'll continue to connect our pop culture fandom with our faith.